Grew up on 1424 East 20th and Ashbury. The first elementary school I went to was Rosedale, now it's called Mary Bethune. 1961 is when I was affected by the relay movement. They wanted us to attend school a half a day, like K through third grade would go in the mornings, fourth through sixth grade would go in the afternoons. Our parents protested. They even set up classroom space in churches, anywhere there was space available, because at that time, during the third migration of Blacks from the South to the North, the Glenville area was just overcrowded with elementary school students. Glenville was a beautiful neighborhood. You know, we have trees, we have flowers. It seemed like every house had some kind of a fruit tree or grapevines, pear trees, peach trees. People planted flowers. In elementary school, we would start seedlings in February and take them home around Memorial Day to plant. You know, some of us would do flowers, some did vegetables, but they had like a garden program in the schools, which I think they should bring back. When they ran out of space, some of us were bused to Murray Hill Elementary School. That was on Murray Hill in Little Italy off of Mayfield. And at that time, Little Italy didn't want Black people in their neighborhood. What I remember the most is that while children in the South were integrating in Birmingham and other cities, and those children were being sick with dogs and rocks. We didn't have no dogs on us, but we did have parents throwing rocks at us. Our parents complained and they said, well, why not send the children to the unused classrooms in the Collinwood neighborhood? And so that's when the busing started. I remember bringing the letter home, and my father, he had what we would call a hissy fit, because he felt like he could have stayed in the South, because what he learned was he thought he was coming up here. They had touted this as the land of milk and honey. And once they started that busing and we were being stoned, he felt like the North was no different from the South when it came to wanting Black children to get an education. Once we arrived at the school, we were in the classroom. We stayed in that classroom. We had our lunch in there. We didn't intermingle with the other students. I can't speak for other children, but I know how my father and parents raised us. Sometimes you're going to go through things. You just have to endure the hardship until you can do better. I just remember my teachers in the first grade started encouraging my parents to move to either Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights, or Beechwood so that we could receive a better education. But my father, he was the type of person, he didn't like to create deals. Whenever he bought something, he liked to pay cash for it. He wanted to build his own home. By 1966, he built his home, and then we moved in August of 67. So I did my high school years at Shaker. I went to Rosedale, Iowa Maple, Hazeldell Elementary School, and was bused to William H. Brett. And I did my junior high school years at Patrick Henry. I didn't want to move because then people would call you Oreos. We were Black on the outside, white on the inside. But what I found out when I got to Shaker, that many of my teachers at Patrick Henry, their children were my classmates. So then I wasn't no longer angry with my father, because I realized that he just wanted us to be in a better area. I like neighborhood schools better because I don't think children know the joy of walking to school. I hope that as they revamp the school system, that they'll bring back the neighborhood schools. Being a relay kid meant that schools were overcrowded and you had to go to school a half a day. If you were a kindergartner through 3rd grader, you went in the mornings. Afternoons were for the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. They did eventually build new schools, and my father, being in the construction business, worked on a lot of the schools, and I would say, "Daddy, why are they building these schools with no windows? They look like prisons to me." Well, at Hazeldell, they had plenty of windows because to me, that was part of the beauty of going to school. Like especially writing an essay or taking a test, you could gaze out the window, look at a bird, get some inspiration. And the new schools they built, windowless schools. I I don't know if I could have survived in that. My paternal grandmother, a Blackfoot Indian, she taught us that each skin color was like a flower. And even some flowers, like Queen Anne's lace, is a weed, but even weeds can be beautiful. We never thought about, oh, you're black, you're white. That wasn't part of my upbringing. I really didn't feel racism until I went to Ohio State when I was 18. While attending school in Cleveland and Shaker, I felt welcomed. I think what I see that's not going on now, as opposed to when I was growing up, parents had a really vested interest in your education. Modern day parents now, a lot of them don't do follow up with their children, don't attend open house. A lot of times teachers might see something in a child that the child don't see in themselves or the parent. So the teachers and the parents work together. The way my parents broke it down was the teachers were to teach us how to read, do our 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. But for the morals, principles, values, that was to be done by the parents. Well, this is the patriarch of our family, William Henry Gilbert Sr. This is when Mount Pleasant now had a writer's workshop back in 2018, and I wrote a story about growing up in Glenville. So this is my uncles and my cousin. My father took this picture. This is my junior high school classroom at Patrick Henry. I remember his motto, "Give me liberty or give me death." That was fitting at the time because people were fighting for our equal rights, civil rights, and some were dying. And then this is a picture of me and my sisters when our birth mother had died. We had the opportunity to stay in Alabama, but my father said he wanted to raise his own girls. Until he remarried, he was like our mother and father. He would braid our hair, get us ready for school, and all that stuff. So I just feel very fortunate to have a father that loved his children. Yeah, I remember those days. They would take us over to William H. But some people, like my sisters, they went to Longfellow. They were bused to Longfellow. I was bused to William H. Brett, and then they would bring us back to Hazeldell at the end of the school day. The only time I was fearful when we was going to Murray Hill. They would be there outside of Murray Hill. As we get off the bus, they would be there to jeering, not cheering us on, but jeering at us. Even terms that we couldn't even call people. We could, like some people like to call it the Italians, because a lot of Italians was living on Murray Hill, Spicks or whatever. Our parents wouldn't let us, use any kind of derogatory name or name calling. When they, did that, then our parents would be there to greet us or, ride the bus with us, but they would be there to make sure that we got in safely. We didn't have that trouble when we went over to William H. Brett. The people were more friendly, so we didn't have that trouble. All we were expected to do was, as soon as class was over, get on that bus and get on out. My father used to say this to us: "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." I remember that, hearing that saying quite a bit. The teachers I remember having, they were all encouraging. The teacher I remember, and she was a principal at Iowa Maple, she always told me that I was gonna do well in life. Miss Reed. Miss Reed. I remember her. I remember my teachers from Patrick Henry, like Mr. Addison, my English teacher. He always told me I would be a great writer. But when I got to Shaker, they're telling me I couldn't write. And I was like, I don't understand. Once I found out that Cleveland school system is like a 90 to 100 is a A, or Shaker, 93 to 100 was a A, 86 to 92 was a B, 80 was a C. And Cleveland, 80 would be a B. A D was 70. So it was just the grading scale. I remember those goulashes. Our parents had us looking neat. Yeah, I remember sometimes my parents would go marching at the Board of Education downtown. I remember those days. They wasn't going to go for that going to school a half a day. That's when they were marching so that we could use unused classrooms in Collinwood or Murray Hill, wherever.